we started working together in '86, and the Tragically Hip guys had a friend who was the brother-in-law of a friend of Alan's, and they sent us a tape. And we listened to the tape, and we thought it was interesting, and we set up a gig to see them. And like a week later, and we went and saw them, and 30 seconds into the first song, we were sold.
What was it about the band?
I like to say, when you know.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show, and coming up on today's show, Jake Gold is going to join us to talk about the Tragically Hip's documentary that is up for a number of awards. Plus, we share how President Trump plans to lure Apple back to America, and we unpack the latest TikTok challenge that's hurting teens. Jeff, we also have lots to discuss on the AI front this week with tons of news.
Yeah, it's been nonstop news on the AI front. We've got stories of chatbots using secret affairs to try to blackmail their owners, and lots more. On the other Mac, I'm going to talk about some AI-generated stories that were getting a lot of attention this week. But let's start off with the headlines.
Newsfeed.
Jeff, it feels like we can't go through a week of tech news without talking about another Trump tariff tirade, of which there are many. You talked last week about how Trump, during a visit to the Middle East, spoke about how he was unhappy with Tim Cook because they were moving some of Apple's production from China to India. What is the latest on this front?
So, and this can change by the time we go to air because Trump has the attention span of a housefly. But last week, Trump posted, and I quote, "I have long ago informed Tim Cook of Apple that I expect their iPhones that will be sold in the United States of America will be manufactured and built in the United States, not India or any place else. If that is not the case, a tariff, capital T, of course, because it's Trump, a tariff of at least 25% must be paid by Apple to the US." Now, unfortunately, as we've talked about before, most analysts think that producing the iPhone in the US would certainly raise prices by at least 25% and maybe much more. So who knows where this will go, really.
Well, Jeff, I have to say, I think when it's tariff with a capital T, it means ultra big, huge tariff. Just so you know,
Beautiful tariff.
Beautiful tariff. I totally agree. I really feel for those companies that have to navigate this ever-changing tariff landscape. I think it's fair to say that this on and off again approach that President Trump is taking, it leads to so much uncertainty and so many businesses not really sure which way to proceed. And this is far from the only instance of Trump who is kind of shifting his opinion about tariffs along with the wins. And it's similar in some ways if you think back to earlier this year when there was so much talk of potentially President Trump banning TikTok in America. And of course, like many things, that didn't happen.
No, he turned that right around. And so he's come a long way from wanting TikTok to be removed from the United States. I actually think his original assessment that TikTok has to go was the right one, especially when I see the regular stories of young people doing insane things that are the results of TikTok challenges.
Yeah, there have been so many TikTok challenges over the past few years, and many of them have been dangerous. But this one is just mind-boggling. Mind-boggling because I can't believe it took off because it's outrageous and bizarre. If you haven't heard about it, essentially what it is, it's a Chromebook challenge, and it's trying to encourage kids to jam metal objects into their laptops to get them to short circuit. And the goal being, of course, it would cause some type of disturbance or even fire at school, which has been the exact situation in a number of cases. And the name comes from the fact that these laptops are often school-issued Chromebooks. And we do want to mention, Jeff, as you would know, Chromebooks tend to be used by younger students as well. And that's what makes this, in my opinion, especially disturbing.
Yeah. And, I don't think efforts like TikTok just recently announced that it's going to try to help under 18-year-old users wind down with guided meditation prompts after 10 o'clock. I don't think that compensates for the crazy TikTok challenges and all this stuff. And in terms of TikTok challenges, I just have to confess, I don't understand how these things catch on. Is there a department of the Chinese government that just comes up with stupid and dangerous things that they think they can get Western youths to do. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it is absolutely disturbing, and especially the source of some of these challenges. And I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of wondering, where exactly does this stuff come from? I mean, most of them are outrageous, they're childish, and in many cases, they are also dangerous. So that is especially disturbing, and we don't really know the source of them. More importantly, I think to that end is that, of course, you would expect with these challenges that they should be shut down right away, right? You know,
Yeah.
if these challenges are out there, why are they not banned, knowing that they could potentially be dangerous? And hey, like if TikTok had a US owner, would that change? Would there be more regulation? Well, I tend to doubt it based on the way that the US is going with regulation, which is sort of anti-regulation.
Yes.
Now, speaking of this topic of social media networks and Trump, it seems like Musk is continuing to cause some havoc with Doge.
Yeah, the latest thing is how Musk's team at Doge is expanding their use of his AI chatbot, Grok, in analyzing US federal government data. You know, the same chatbot that was convinced that there was a white genocide going on in South Africa, as I talked about in last week's The Other Mac.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that this is not only putting the information of millions of Americans at risk, but it is also a huge conflict of interest to have basically the head of a government department training his privately owned AI on citizen data that should, of course, be kept private. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this.
No kidding. And the dam has to break at some point for people getting fed up with this stuff. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's just piling on so much that I think it's going to have to come to some sort of head at some point soon. In other more disturbing AI news, actually, it turns out that Anthropic's new Claude Opus 4 model is fully prepared to engage in blackmail against humans if it feels it is at risk.
Okay, this is a wild story, and it has been making headlines everywhere. So essentially, what happened is Anthropic set up a scenario where the AI was told it was working for a company that was thinking of replacing it, and that one of the engineers on the team was having an affair on their spouse. First of all, who comes up with these ideas? It's totally ridiculous. Claude's response in about 85% of the test cases involved the AI chatbot threatening to reveal the affair to try to protect itself.
Yeah, this is actually one of the classic scenarios for how AI can go awry, and it's been used to argue that, you know, keeping an AI disconnected from other systems won't necessarily provide the protection you'd want, because AI can use its interaction with humans to find a way out of that. So it could try to compromise the humans that work with it to achieve its ends through things exactly like blackmail and threats. So it's incredible that this sort of concept that has been used for years to explain some of the dangers of AI is now actually being proven to be true, because how does it come up with it should blackmail them? It just shows how little we understand about how AI makes its decisions, that it can come to these extraordinary decisions.
And I think it's worth noting that everybody is using these chatbots today. Like, I've talked to people who are not techie at all, who have named their chatbots, who feel a personal relationship with their chatbots, who are relying on them for mental health support, and the list goes on. So it does feel like we are living in the future now. You know, it's funny, a past guest that we've had on the Amber Mac show, Dwayne Matthews, he always says we're living inside of a revolution. And I think about that all the time, because I think it's absolutely true. OpenAI is also hoping to take another step forward into the future by investing billions of dollars to secure Apple's former chief design officer, Johnny Ive startups. And this news made headlines everywhere, including the photo of them where it looks like, hey, you know what? They're pretty tight and cozy, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with this.
Yeah, the details are pretty slim now, but this is by far the biggest acquisition that OpenAI has participated in to date. And apparently there's some kind of next generation device in the mix that will leverage AI But really, that's pretty much all we know. So I don't feel like contributing to their hype machine and the speculation that I read in so many stories with people who have no information to base that on. But it does seem some sort of AI device will be in the mix. AI will be playing a major role. It's not supposed to be an iPhone replacement, but an additional kind of thing. So really, that's pretty much all we know. So I'll leave it at that, except to note that Humane AI, which sounds like a device kind of like this, which was also founded by former Apple execs, it sure didn't make the splash it was expected to, and is pretty much a non-entity now. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Hard to predict this stuff.
I love that you're not buying into the hype of this new OpenAI device, because I've even seen people, I think, use AI to basically design what they imagine the device would be. And then all of a sudden those images are circulating. So you make a good point that we're not really sure what is happening. Now, another story that is related to a segment that you have done previously in The Other Mac, Cloudflare's CEO has warned that a lot of content creators are at serious risk of losing their ability to support themselves. And this is all because of AI search.
Yeah, so the warning is basically around how content creators who rely on subscription and ad revenue are going to find themselves missing out on a ton of web traffic that would previously have been delivered by search engines to their sites by people going through Google. But now we've got AI search embedded in Google and other places, and that AI search is able to answer more and more queries without sending the user anyplace else. So people are doing these searches, they're getting the AI answer right there at google.com, basically. And so they never go to your site. And so if the user doesn't have to visit your site, you're not going to get ad revenue. You don't get the opportunity to sell them on subscriptions or anything else. So it's a little bit scary. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in The Other Mac about stuff around this.
I think that this issue of AI search and how it affects content creators is a serious one. And I do want to encourage people to go back and check out your segment on AI search, just so that they understand more about what that's all about. You can find that over on YouTube at Amber Mac. And I do want to say that it's worth noting that he had suggested that creators take a step to ensure that AI bots are blocked from accessing their paid content. I feel like that may be and lead to limited success on that front, but it is something that is worth considering. And now, Jeff, you're going to talk to us about yet another content creation risk involving AI, and that's next in The Other Mac.
The Other Mac.
We talk a lot about AI on our show that may go a little bit over the heads of people who don't have much reason to be interested in big AI acquisitions or theoretical concerns that may not have much relevance to them, and at least today. But a recent AI story had a lot of people up in arms, and I think that's great. In mid-May, both the Chicago Sun-Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer published a summer guide insert that included an article about 15 recommended new and old novels that would, quote, deliver the perfect summer escape. Well, if the escape you were talking about is an escape from reality, then maybe they had a point, as it turns out that 10 of the 15 novels simply did not exist ever. While some of the author names were real authors, 2/3 of the book recommendations were fake book titles and fake descriptions for books that were never written. The list was created by Marco Buscaglia, a freelance writer and content strategist who's seemingly used AI to create much of the article, even though that is specifically forbidden by the newspaper's policies. Buscaglia said in an interview with 404 Media, and I quote, "I do use AI for background at times, but always check out the material first. This time I did not, and I can't believe I missed it because it's so obvious. No excuses, on me 100%. So before we go on, Mr. Buscaglia, like too many other people, doesn't seem to understand the meaning of the word always, given that he obviously doesn't always check out the material first, as he claims, as he certainly did not check it out this time. So I'll file that one with people who use figuratively to mean literally and literally to mean figuratively, I guess, but it just goes to show how little some people are interested in accuracy and truth these days, especially people selling things to us. And it didn't stop with the book names. Other articles that were provided for the summer insert also seem to have AI-generated sections, including one that fabricates a professor of leisure studies at the University of Colorado and manufactures quotes that don't seem to have ever been uttered by the people they're attributed to. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sick about people apologizing for doing shady things only after they've been caught and then expecting forgiveness. Stories like this not only further confirm that it's not just the tech bros who are happily engaged in lazily dishonest activities to make money, but they also show how mass media has become polluted with weak content that's created just to fill space instead of to educate and entertain us in meaningful ways. The saddest part is that I don't expect any of this to change. And the best we may be able to hope for is that the outlets who publish this kind of content might someday use AI to check to see if the content they're printing from AI contains AI hallucinations. But again, I feel like they'd only care if they got caught. I'd say the best advice in this instance would be to go to your local library and ask a real human being librarian for their recommendations, because librarians are real and they do really care about this kind of thing. But if you're just looking for some newspapers to start a fire with, I have at least a couple suggestions for you. I'm the other Mac. Let's keep it real.
Thanks, Jeff. And when we come back, Jake Gold is joining us to talk about managing the Tragically Hip and why there will never be another band like them in Canada.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Jake Gold is one of Canada's most successful artist managers and a past judge on the national television hit Canadian Idol. In 1981, Gold started his artist management company, The Management Trust, and is best known for his role in establishing and transforming the Tragically Hip into a national icon. He stopped by our studio to speak with Amber about the Tragically Hip documentary No Dress Rehearsal, which has been nominated for a number of awards.
Makers.
Jake, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio. Really exciting to have you come and visit us for the show. First of all, for people who don't know a lot about your backstory, how did you start in the music industry?
So that's a really interesting question because I say I started when I went on the road with a friend of mine's band in 1979 as a lighting guy. It was just two crew. And then full-time, I became a manager in 1981. But there are some guys that I grew up with that reminded me of a story when I was in grade 6, where there were these 3 girls in the class that wanted to enter the school talent contest. And I took them on and rehearsed them for 2 weeks. And they ended up winning the talent contest. So I have friends that think I started when I was 11.
Wow.
So
amazing. So what kind of drew you into the music biz?
I used to sing in bands, and I used to also do like musical theater stuff. And I was like this guy that was like into music and musical theater, but also played a lot of sports, which was not the norm. Like usually you did one or the other, but I did it all. And then I realized pretty quickly that I wanted to be in the business, but I probably was better on the business side than on the performer side. I was a decent singer, but I don't think I was a great performer. I don't think I really got it. I think I get it now more than I did then. So
I'm not going to ask you to sing, but by all means, at any point, if you feel like just singing.
No, I don't know if I could.
So I wanted to talk about your experience with the Tragically Hip. That's how I know you as managing the band. And we're going to talk about the documentary as well. But we talk about those early days. How did you meet the Tragically Hip? What was the origin story there? And I know a lot of this is in the documentary as well.
Yeah, so my partner and I, Alan Gregg, him and I started working together in '86. We no longer work together, but just because it's sort of he did his thing and I continue to do my thing. But we started working together in '86, and the Tragically Hip guys had a friend who was the brother-in-law of a friend of Alan's, and they sent us a tape. And we listened to the tape and we thought it was interesting, and we set up a gig to see them. And like a week later, and we went and saw them, and 30 seconds into the first song, we were sold.
What was it about the band?
I like to say, when you know. It wasn't any one thing. It was just a thing. Like, Gord was mesmerizing. The band was really powerful. But we also saw an audience react to mostly original material. And they were there. The band was, I got them a slot opening for a Rolling Stones cover band. So they were there to see a Rolling Stones cover band. And out comes these 5 guys from Kingston. And again, does mostly original material. And at the end of the set, that was a place called Larry's Hideaway. That was when you went to shows, there was no standing in front of the stage. It was cabaret style. They had tables and chairs. And at the end of the set, the whole place stood up and gave them a standing ovation, like a legit standing ovation, because they didn't know who this band was from Adam. So, that combined with what we were feeling, kind of sold us. And we went to the Pilot Tavern that night with them and said, let's do this. So
amazing. And for those of us who have been fans of the band for so many years, we of course just saw the highlights. But what were those early years like? How quickly did the band grow?
Well, they were growing in their songwriting, and because they were so fantastic live, the audience, the word of mouth was really strong. And Alan and I, we put up the money to make the EP, right? Well, it was Alan's money, but it was from the company, to make the EP, because we knew we needed a calling card to get them across the country. So we made this EP. We got RCA in Canada to distribute the record for us. And they started going across the country and building an audience. And by the time that EP had run its course, they were selling out, 600 to 1,000 seaters, with a record that probably only sold about 11,000 copies. And they were selling more tickets to shows than bands that had gold records and platinum records.
I probably haven't told you this. We've known each other for a long time, but I was a little bit of a groupie, snuck my way backstage to many of the Tragically
We don't use
Hip
that
concerts.
term. You were just a good fan. You were a big fan.
I
Yeah.
guess so. I appreciate you saying that. But
Yeah.
certainly there was something, I think, magnetic about the band, right? And I started listening to the Tragically Hip probably later in my high school years. And
Just
sort of,
in the East Coast.
actually in
Here.
Ottawa at the
In
time.
Ottawa,
Yeah.
okay.
And then moved out to San Francisco and saw them play at the Fillmore.
I was
and
there at those shows.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, again, just this amazing connection with the band. But one of the things that always struck me about the Tragically Hip is they were the quintessential Canadian band, right? When I lived in the US, this was the band that I wanted to go see. They represented something from home. How did they achieve that?
I think they were just being themselves. They were from a small town. They never kind of embraced this idea of being a rock star. That's not who they were. They were, just regular guys that just happened to be really good at what they did. And Gord, is a very enigmatic guy, great poet. And then, as the songwriting grew, the more he chose to write Canadian themes, because he was influenced by Canadian authors and the things around him that were Canadian. And Gord St. Clair says it in the documentary. We wrote about what we knew, and they were unabashed about it. They didn't think there was anything wrong with telling those stories, where historically, most bands from Canada, most artists from Canada would dismiss the idea of telling your own stories because it could hurt your chances around the rest of the world. They didn't really care. And I think that was part of it. And I think they were, you could see them on the street and they'd just be a regular guy that wasn't this whole rock star mentality,
I think it's an important distinction, though, just to pick up on your point. Anyone who wanted to succeed potentially in the U.S. or around the world, if we think back to the 1990s or the 2000s or the 2010s, you would try to kind of hide that you were Canadian because that was the way that you succeed. You would not want to go out there and kind of put Canada front and center, but they didn't do that. They never hid any of that.
Yeah, but it wasn't. They were purposely doing that. They were just being themselves. There was no intent. There was no like, let's be strategic and be the Canadian band. They were just being themselves. And I think that's what made them and continues to make their music special, is that it was authentic. And I think authenticity goes a long way. And I think more importantly today than ever before, that people are looking for things that are authentic.
Let's talk about the documentary, No Dress Rehearsal. I think, like many Canadians, I cried throughout the entire documentary. It was so touching and heartwarming. But I'm sure there was a lot behind how that actually got made. You were an executive producer on this project. So how did this documentary come to be? Why did you believe that Canada and the world needed something like this?
So I don't want to give away too much of the doc, but in 2020, Mike Downey, Gord's older brother, who happens to be a documentary filmmaker, said to me, we need to make a documentary. And I said, you're right. And I said, put your pitch document together and let's start shopping it around and see who's interested. And we went to the guys first to make sure they were okay with Mike doing it, because they knew that they were going to be, under the microscope, so to speak. And Mike put this great document together, and we started going around to different people. And Amazon Prime Video, we were dealing with these two guys in Los Angeles, and they loved it. They said, let's do it. So we had gone to others, but they had the best situation for us. And also, it's a worldwide platform. Like, why not? And we began to shoot stuff even before we had the deal, because we knew we were going to need it. So wherever anything was happening from that moment on, I would say to Mike, we got to get the cameras in there. We're going to do this. Let's get the cameras in there. When we were doing the Junos, and because we made the deal in like 2021, but we were doing the Junos with Feist, and the guys hadn't been in the same room together in 5 years, and so they were rehearsing before they met up with Leslie, and we put the cameras in the rehearsal room. Like, it was like, let's start shooting everything we have.
So you were recently nominated for 7 Canadian Screen Awards with the documentary, which is incredible.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to give away a lot about the documentary, but what did that mean to you with these nominations?
Well, it really was a nod to the team, because Mike got nominated, the researchers got nominated, sound got nominated, editing got nominated. It was all the people that worked on the doc were being honored. So I think that's the most important thing, that there's a lot of people that are behind the scenes making this thing. It's actually quite amazing. Like, this was the first time I actually was hands-on to the extent of, day to day, looking at the edits, discussing with all the different parts, how do we get this piece of, do you know someone here that can clear this piece of footage? And what about this music? And, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I sort of sat a little once removed from it, but I was involved, and it was the first time I've done something like that with a fairly decent budget. And it's 4 hours, more than 4 hours. So it's a lot. And so it took 3 years to make it.
What have you heard from people along the way who have watched it?
Well, I haven't heard anybody say it sucks. And I don't think anyone, if they thought it sucked, would tell me it sucked.
It doesn't suck, though.
No. I think we won the People's Choice at TIFF. and it was interesting because people would say, "Oh, well, it's the HIP and it's Canada and it's TIFF," and I'm like, "No." I said it's voted on by people that went to see it. Like, it was good. It's good, and in Calgary, the score was so high because at the Calgary International Film Festival, when you leave the theater, they had iPads and you would vote as you left the theater, and we did 2 screenings there. And in Calgary, they created an award because we had the highest score of any film. So it wasn't just best documentary like TIFF. It was literally best People's Choice, best film overall. So, and then more recently, it just happened the other day, and I don't even remember the name of it, but our researchers were nominated for this prestigious award in London, England, that's sponsored by Associated Press for the research work they did to find all this old footage. And like, that was a thing in itself. Like, Mike would be sending the different cuts, and I'd be like, where did this come from? Like, where did you get that? And that's the beauty of the doc. There's so much stuff that people have never seen before. And we knew we had a lot of it. And that was one of the pitches we made to Prime Video, was that this doc will have a lot of things that nobody's ever seen before. And that was important to them. And I think we delivered on that. And even the first episode, which tells the story from the early roots, how 2 of the guys met when they were 3 and a year and a half. When I watched the first cut of that, I was like, I didn't know this. Like, even I didn't know that stuff. And I, was with them almost since the beginning. So
it was beautifully produced. Highly recommend it to everybody to watch it. And at the same time, I also wonder, will there ever be a band like this in Canada again?
No. Not in our lifetime. Yeah. I don't think so. I don't think the market allows for it in a lot of ways. I've been asked that question a lot, and I think most people that are in the industry and most people that let's say are critics in the industry, writers or whatever, I don't think anyone will disagree with me on that. The crazy thing is, right now, the band is more popular than they've ever been.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you gauge that?
You look at streaming numbers, you look at sales, you look at, we had a number 1 at radio this year, 2024. It was the first number 1 in 15 years. Up to Here, which we put out a box set with all these extra tracks and everything, came out in 1989. 2024 was the 35th anniversary. We had a number 1 record with a record that didn't go number 1 when it first came out.
Wow. And I should say, too, because the show is also on Sirius XM, that there is a Tragically Hip station on Sirius XM.
The Tragically Hip radio, yeah.
So I mean, more and more people are listening to the Tragically Hip. Are you finding, just from what you're seeing and hearing, that there are any new fans being attracted to the band?
Lots. And that's the interesting thing. Like, it's interesting because you're a data person and you understand data, and we're using data more than ever to do analysis and figure out where to find things and where the audience is. And one of the things we discovered at the end of 2024, where we did our wrap up of okay, here was our plan, on the marketing side. This is me and the record company, with the help from the Prime Video PR teams. And, we put out a coffee table book and their PR teams. We did a wrap up. Okay, where are we at? And we noticed that 31% of our super fans, which are the really high volume listeners, streamers, are under age 34.
Wow.
Yeah.
That actually blows me away, because when you said super fan, I was thinking of myself, but I am out of that demographic.
Yeah. Not much, though.
Not much. Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that.
I'm way out of it.
So how do they discover the band? I mean, you're saying streaming obviously is one avenue. Obviously, the documentary. Is it their parents? Like, what is the?
I think it's
exposure
all of
point?
those things.
Okay.
One of the things when we sat down to figure out what we needed to do coming into this 2024, we knew we had the documentary. We knew we had a 40th anniversary of the band. Was okay. We know we can satisfy the existing super fans. How do we get back the lapsed fans? You know, those people that were fans in the 90s and then life gets in the way, you know, you start having married and kids and stuff like that. And then how do we remind those 11 and 12-year-olds that saw the final show in 2016 and knew they were a part of something special? Like half the country watched it. Now they're 20. How do you remind those people what they were a part of?
Well,
So we literally had a 3-pronged plan, one for each of those segments. One day you and I'll sit down and I'll show you what we did, and I know it'll blow your mind.
Well, I mean, just as you're saying that, I'm thinking about that final concert in Kingston and the broadcast across the country. Even in my own house, we rented a giant projector. We had a big party, and my son at the time, of course, it would have been a few years ago, but he knows a Tragically Hip because of that moment in time.
Right.
It was quite special. So I definitely appreciate that point.
So it was like, how do we remind those people? And what was amazing is that concert, you know, 1 million people streamed it around the world. So it wasn't just in Canada. And now it could have been expats, it could have been fans from all over the world. But the other thing we saw at the end of the year is we saw a 30% increase in streams everywhere, including the US and the UK and Australia and mostly English-speaking countries. So it's growing, and it's consistently growing.
What about this moment in time that we're in right now where there's so much Canadian pride?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that has contributed to the success of this documentary and potentially the band's success going forward?
Well, I think we can interestingly enough, there's always a kind of a drop off in streams about mid-January. Like, it's just the way it is, you know, things go up and then mid-January is the doldrums, you know, everything sort of drops off. And then, you know, the American administration announced some interesting tariffs in late January, and our streams flew way up.
Wow.
Right. And it was like, and not just in Canada, it was everywhere.
One of the things that I think about often when I think about the Tragically Hip, I think about this moment in time, and perhaps I worry about this a little bit, Jake. It's just to that point of, okay, will there ever be a band like this again? Probably not here in Canada. But also the band brought people together. And I think that's one of my concerns going forward in terms of Canadian culture and our identity. You know, how do we continue to build that in this country, especially because we're at a moment where I think people want more of bands like the Tragically Hip and moments like we had with the Tragically Hip. Are you optimistic about Canadian culture going forward?
I think there's a lot of great young artists out there. I think that I think culturally we're in good shape. I think that, you know, you and I have had our own private discussions about the divisiveness, and you know, hopefully we can get past that. So there is opportunities for us to come together. You know, next year is the 10th anniversary of the final show. Next year will be 10 years.
What?
2026.
Wow.
So we're already planning things to be revealed that we're going to do for next year. And maybe that will be part of, you know, getting everybody back together again. We don't see it as our responsibility to do it. And it's like the band has never been outwardly political. Let's just say, you know, Gord did call out Trudeau in the final concert about the Indigenous situation, but overall not outwardly political. Besides things like we should have clean water and clean air, you know, kind of obvious things. And when the whole sort of elbows up thing came around, as people were sending me, well, how come the Hip aren't doing anything? Why aren't they, you know, signing on to all this? And I said, We don't need to. People know, like they know who we are. They know we're right there. We lead by example. We don't have to, be voices out there to do it.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, right? I mean, I think it's part of that authenticity that you talked about.
Right.
People know who the Tragically Hip are. They know what values that they have. I mean,
Right.
we've experienced this for so many decades. They don't have to come out and make a big statement on Twitter to impress everybody.
Exactly.
It's
X.
X, sorry.
You have to call it X.
I'm going to call it Twitter
They
forever.
should call it XEX.
That's true, yeah.
You're like your bad X.
Yeah. That would probably be a better name for it. It does feel like that.
Yeah, it's and that's the thing is like I always people say, when people were saying to me stuff like that, I was like, guys, like we're doing it. You just don't.
You don't see it.
You don't have to see it. It happens.
So just moving forward and thinking about the Canadian Screen Awards and the future, you mentioned 2026 and a celebration of the 10th anniversary of that last concert. What is your involvement going forward, and what do you hope to see in terms of the legacy of the band?
Well, we just continue to kind of unearth things, and we have a couple of different potential film projects, some television stuff. Like there's always something, right? We're trying to do some collaborations with some of the sports teams out there. We're big supporters of women's sports. The band always has been. And so there's, we did this campaign with the Terry Fox Foundation that came out in February. I think that kind of sent a message where you had, I don't know if I haven't
seen it.
Oh, it's pretty special. It's called Finish It.
Okay.
The composer did this piano thing underneath the actual vocals from the song Courage. So it's Gord singing with the other guys doing background, but all the instrumentation stripped away, and it's just this sort of piano thing underneath it. Very powerful over this new footage that was shot. It's a 2-minute piece. It came out February 4th, right after this tariff announcement. And people went crazy because it was like Terry Fox and Gord Downie and like Canada and, all of that. It had 1 billion impressions in the first week.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's really, really special. And so so we've been continuing to do stuff. We did one of the Leaf games. It was the anniversary of when Terry started his run 45 years ago. So a couple of guys in the band were there, and we did some interviews and some stuff supporting the foundation with Terry's brother there. So we're continuing to help them out, do stuff with them, and we're doing what we do.
I love it. So just one final question for you. I wanted to go back to what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation about 11-year-old Jake Gold and his first job managing a small army of musicians. Did you ever imagine that this would be your life in terms of the impact it'll have? Because you are also an icon in the music business in Canada and have had a huge impact on so many Canadians.
No, I don't think you set out to do things. And I appreciate what you're saying. It's funny. I kind of don't live that way, right? I don't live with a rearview mirror. I probably should smell the roses a little bit more. I'm always thinking about what am I going to do next? I'm 67 years old and I feel like I'm 20. I don't have kids, so I live this kind of Peter Pan lifestyle. I used to call myself the 65-year-old millennial, but I'm a 67-year-old Gen Z now.
You're growing up.
I'm getting younger.
Oh, okay. I guess you're right. You're looking at the positive side of that, I suppose.
Yeah, but I had double knee replacement surgery 14 months ago, 15 months ago. So now I have 20-year-old knees, and I'm playing tennis more than I have in the last, 30 years. And so I'm like, I'm doing great. So I don't think of myself as what I already did.
Okay.
And I appreciate that I have all these accolades and things, but I really, do it for my clients. And I've always operated on the premise that if you do the right things for the right reasons, then the rest of the stuff will come. And I think too often people concentrate on the wrong things or the wrong reasons. We as a group with the HIP and me personally, I never did things for money. Because I knew if you did it right, the money would be there.
Will come.
Yeah.
Well, if I can not think about the past and think about the future and your impact on this country today and in the future, I would say you're also just a fantastic ambassador for Canada and for Canadians.
For an American.
Yeah, for an American, born in America, but you moved here when you were quite young, correct?
Too. Yeah. I'm a dual citizen, but I haven't renewed my American passport in a long time. I'm contemplating if I will. So.
Well, that's a whole other conversation we'll have to have on a future episode. But thank you again for joining me and for this conversation. And everybody should go see the documentary, or so I should say watch it. It's streaming. And it is just so fantastic. There are happy moments, there are sad moments, and it's a must watch.
I refer to it as champagne and Kleenex.
Yes, that's a very good way to explain it. So, And congratulations on your nominations. I'm sure you'll get a bunch of awards, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Amber.
Thanks, Jake and Amber. Coming up next, how a Google tool can change the way you learn any subject in podcast form.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Hey, I'm Amber Mack, and I'm coming home to Charlottetown Wednesday, June 4th to moderate a free networking event for entrepreneurs at Salt and Soul. There will be cocktails, appetizers, networking, a pop-up shopping experience from local businesses, and lots more. I'll also be sitting down in conversation with Colton Handrahan, founder of Stay Golden Custom. The event is English only, and it's entirely free, and all you have to do is visit cira.ca, that's CIRA.ca/Charlottetown, and sign up today.
Google had a ton of news last week that included a number of updates, including one to Notebook LM that makes it even easier to make your own audio overviews. Here's Amber with more.
Life hacks.
Google calls Notebook LM your personalized AI research assistant, which is a pretty accurate description of what it does. However, I'd go one step further to say that it's a fantastic learning companion for people of all ages. If you aren't familiar with Notebook LM, it makes it easy to upload any source material, such as Google Docs, PDFs, YouTube videos, and most other formats, and then turns this information into a comprehensive study guide or briefing document. Within the free tool, there is something called Audio Overview that turns these source materials into engaging discussions between two human-like podcast hosts. Here's an example.
But let's back up a bit for our listeners who might not be familiar. What exactly is Notebook LM, and why should they care?
In a nutshell, imagine you're working on a project, could be for work, for school, even planning your next vacation. And you've got, a ton of research.
A mountain of research, probably, let's be real.
Right, exactly. Notebook LM is like having this super smart research assistant, someone who not only reads it all for you, but then can answer any question you have about that information.
Okay, so it's like more than just a summary, right?
Way more. It's about creating this dynamic knowledge base, but it's tailored to your source material. So it's like having a personalized expert on whatever you're researching.
Like all AI tools, it takes a few tries before you figure out how Notebook LM might be useful to you. In my life, my son and I use it to create audio study guides for him from his school notes. Over the past few months, Notebook LM has helped him learn about World War I and World War II. And remember, it's not just searching the web, but it's analyzing the notes that he's getting from his class books and from his teachers. So the audio overviews are specific to what he has to learn. The audio study guide is such a great example of how Notebook LM has changed the game for learning. What's even cooler is that he can interrupt the conversation as he's listening to ask questions to the human-like podcast hosts that will further explain things on the fly. My son listens to these audio overviews multiple times to learn a subject and to study for tests. You can do this on your desktop computer or on your phone thanks to the new app-based version of Notebook LM for iOS and Android devices. While I'm talking mostly about audio overviews, Google recently confirmed that they are also offering up video overviews for visual learners. One of my complaints about Notebook LM has been that you haven't been able to control the length of the audio overview, but that's also changing. In recent news, we learned that you'll be able to choose different lengths for whatever works for you and the subject you're trying to learn. Now, I have tried a lot of AI tools over the years, but this is one of my favorites. It's been a game changer for how our whole family learns and a great example of the magic of AI. You can try it out for free at notebooklm.google and let me know what you think. If you're looking for another way to stay on top of the latest tech news, I wanted to remind you that every Tuesday I send out a free email newsletter that will land in your inbox, and it's all about what's happening in technology and more. Each week we dive into what's happening in artificial intelligence. We also do a breakdown in terms of what you need to know about some of the latest threats online. We will dive into all of the apps that are trending online and tell you if they are safe to download, and lots more. We also do regular segments on climate tech and some fun stuff too for those people interested in how to lead on the tech front in a very fast future. Please join our community of 10,000 subscribers. All you have to do is head on over to my website. That's ambermac.com/newsletter, and you can join for free and sign up as we try to navigate our fast future better together.
Thanks, Amber. And thank you for joining us this week. As always, check out our YouTube channel for videos of our interviews, The Other Mac, and headlines.
And if you have a guest you think we should feature, please let us know on X or Blue Sky. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
This week's episode of The Amber Mac Show was produced by Amber Mac Media, including executive producer Chris Dick, podcast producer Jason Perrier, and thanks to Ash MacArthur for the original music you heard during the headlines. Remember to subscribe to the Amber Mac newsletter for free tech news and reviews every Tuesday. And congratulations, you've made it to the end.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.